Well, first I'd like to start off and thank everyone for coming in the calm before the storm that begins next week. I'm sure the last thing you wanted to do is yet another meeting on transportation, but hopefully we're going to have a productive, interesting discussion here today. I'm Kelly McCutchen, and I'm Executive Vice President of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. We're a nonpartisan think tank that looks at issues like transportation, healthcare, and education, and how to improve them in our great state. And just want to give you a very quick overview of the ideas we're going to talk about today. I'm going to turn it over to our panel of experts to react and give you some pros and cons to those ideas. Transportation is clearly very important to our state, and I think no one's going to debate that issue. And there are two things I think we all can agree on today. One is we have unacceptably high levels of traffic congestion in Metro Atlanta area. We realize traffic congestion means you're growing, and we're happy to be a growing, thriving city and area and state. But we also realize that once it gets to a point that we have now and have had for some time, it starts to impact quality of life, and it hinders our ability to continue to grow and improve productivity and attract new jobs and business to our state and to our city. So that's number one. Secondly, I think we all can agree that our current motor vehicle tax revenues are insufficient to provide the revenues that we need to make the investments we need to make for those improvements to happen. Now, there are a lot of sources of revenue, and those can be discussed. But I think before we have the revenue discussion, what's been missing in this discussion, we've been talking about transportation for at least 10 years in a very focused way. We've had tremendous amount of studies, lots of meetings, lots of seminars like this one. But what we really lack is a comprehensive vision, a statewide plan of where are we going to make those investments in Georgia? How do those investments build on investments we've already made? How do those investments work together to come up with a comprehensive vision for the entire state of Georgia? And so that's what we're going to try to do today, is to throw out some ideas. This is a very conceptual plan. We don't have a thick study to accompany it. All the studies have been done. We don't need more studies. But hopefully it's a new way of thinking about the problem that puts ideas that have been proposed, not just by us, by many other people in many places, together in a way that makes sense. So we can bring people together to say, hey, we can support that plan and start moving forward in our legislative process. We believe, and transportation is a lot like other two big issues in our state, healthcare and education. Always short of money, and certainly a situation where you can throw literally billions of dollars at the problem, and if you don't do it in a strategic way, you're not going to get a very good return on investment. So we need to really have this idea of what are we going to do? So where do you start? There are a lot of ways you can think about our problem. But Georgia is very important. Atlanta started off as a transportation hub, and Georgia moves an incredible amount of freight. And that's where we chose to begin our focus. Logistics, distribution, and movement of goods is critical to our state. We have industry in this state that are not just national leaders, but worldwide leaders in their areas. And that is the future of our state. So we have to focus on freight. And if you're looking at freight, we have constantly said rail freight is very important. Just because we're not focusing on that today does not mean that we don't, that's not an important part of the plan. But the majority of the freight that's moved is on trucks. And the additional benefit of looking at trucks is trucks are on the roads with the rest of us, passengers. And we all are contributing to traffic congestion. So by addressing the efficient movement of trucking industry through our state, we also can address the traffic congestion problem. So we thought, where is the biggest problem? And you've seen the studies. This is not going to be a surprise. Both for rail and for trucking, the I-75 corridor from Chattanooga through Atlanta down to Macon is the most congested. Countless studies have shown that. We did a study several years ago. We asked the question, we brought in some consultants and said, what would it take, forget about money, what would it take to eliminate traffic congestion in Metro Atlanta? And, by definition of eliminate traffic congestion, stop-and-go conditions. You're still going to have slowdowns during rush hour, but stop-and-go conditions. And they came back with a plan, which I thought made some sense. 3 big things. One was a network of high-occupancy toll lanes throughout all the interstates in Atlanta. And I'm happy to say it looks like we're moving toward that direction. It gives you a good non-congested corridor for transit. It helps relieve traffic congestion. And even better, through those tolls, which are voluntary, it either pays for itself completely or pays for a majority of that investment. So that is great. But the second was you've got to look at truck traffic. And they came up with 2 different proposals. One was some truck-only toll lanes and a couple of tunnels. Unfortunately, when you're adding capacity in a built-up area, you don't want to go right through and bulldoze neighborhoods. You're going to have to go under. And tunnel technology's come a long way. They're building one right under the gardens at Versailles Castle, right outside of Paris. So it can be done, but it's incredibly expensive. So it's sort of like that children's song, you can't go through it, you can't go under it, you got to go around it. So we thought, how can you somehow divert traffic around the metro area? And particularly, are there investments out there we've already made or that we plan to make, already on the books, that we can utilize to limit the cost? So we came up with something like this. And we're a nonprofit, so the graphics are not going to be quite as sharp as the consulting company, so I apologize for that. The general idea, and don't pay attention to where the line is drawn, it was just freehand, and there have been a lot of studies about that, but US 27, I think I've known Rogers Wade for about 15 years, and about that whole time, having grown up around Chattanooga, he's talked about US 27 that starts in Chattanooga, goes all the way down the state, down to Bainbridge, as a great alternative route that we ought to take advantage of. So that's where we started. And the beauty of it, it's already been 4-lane for most of the portion in North Georgia. It goes from Chattanooga down through Rome, through Cedartown. It crosses over I-20 at Bremen, goes down through Carrollton, and then it continues on through LaGrange and Columbus and then on down to Bainbridge. But at some point, and there again, we're not saying where that point would be, you would swing that around to hook into Macon, and then you have a bypass of Atlanta for all that traffic that's going north-south. There will have to be some new construction on that southern part, but a lot of this is already in the plans on the books. So that in and of itself, we think makes a lot of sense. But when you're thinking with a strategic plan, all the parts have to fit together, and it starts to make more sense when you put together another piece of the puzzle. Also, in the plans for the state, have been talked about for years and years and years, is the Fall Line Freeway, which runs from Columbus to Macon to Augusta. The part from Columbus to Macon, a lot of that is already completed. Some of it's done from Macon to Augusta. If you prioritize these 2 projects and complete them, you think about it, you then have a network from Middle Georgia. You can get nearly everywhere you need to go without going through Metro Atlanta. Now, about 30-40% of the truck traffic is through traffic. Numbers differ depending on the study. They don't really want to go through Atlanta, but they don't have a choice. Right now, they pretty much have to. And they get stuck in traffic just like we do. Time is money. So we try to figure that out. Secondly, there's another group of trips, about a third, where trucks are coming into the Metro Atlanta area, but they're doing so not to make deliveries to the end user, but for distribution, to a breakdown point or a distribution facility, loading up again and going somewhere else. If we were able to move some of that distribution capability down to Middle Georgia, and we're not taking away any jobs from Atlanta, there's plenty of growth coming, that this can be the new distribution capability, then all kinds of interesting options occur. And this is where we get the fancy graphics. The port traffic is growing like this. It is going up and up and up. We have a bustling port system. We've got to get those goods to market as quickly as possible. So if you're a truck coming up from the port and you get to Macon, going south on 75 is going to be easy. If you're going to go 85 south, you take the new Fall Line Freeway straight to Columbus and hook up to I-85 south. If you're going west on I-20, you take the new bypass up to Bremen and head on out I-20. Clearly, if you're going to Chattanooga, we've got the bypass for you. I-20 east, you head up the new Fall Line Freeway straight shot to Augusta and out I-20. And even better, if you're heading up to the Charlotte area or in that vicinity or north on I-85, then you can take the Fall Line Freeway all the way to Columbia and up and hook up to I-85 north in Charlotte. So this opens up lots of possibilities. Notice none of this had to go through Metro Atlanta. Now, there's been a lot of talk about an east-west connector north of Atlanta. We're not talking about that today. Clearly, we think that probably is a necessary part of a transportation plan. But as you see, there is a way to get I-85 north in this plan. The beauty of it is a lot of these roads are already in existence or already on the books. The capability, and we'll hear some experts talking about that today, is can you shift enough logistics and distribution capability to Middle Georgia to where this really makes sense? So you really have a tremendous amount of truck traffic that possibly could be diverted, which would have a lot of traffic congestion implications on the Metro Atlanta area. Now, there are other things that become possible with this kind of conceptual framework. How about high-speed rail? Now, we've been critical of rail programs. The problem is a catch-22 with rail. If it's going to be fast enough, like the 150-mile-an-hour trains they talked about, being feasible now from Macon to Atlanta to Charlotte in the paper yesterday or today, it's incredibly expensive. If you can afford it, like commuter rail, and it's painfully slow. It's not fast enough to get people out of their cars. But think, what the two most important, the most expensive parts of passenger rail and high-speed rail, acquiring the land and the right-of-way, and also getting rid of all the at-grade crossings, the bridges and overpasses. Well, what if we need to upgrade I-16 with all this new port traffic coming? The right-of-way there is probably relatively inexpensive. You expand that right-of-way with the thought that sometime in the future we might have high-speed passenger rail going down the median. You've already bought your right-of-way and you have a straight pathway with no at-grade crossings. At that point, maybe it makes sense. As you're talking about commuter rail, rather than just commuter rail, and that's all it's ever going to be, if you're doing it with the idea of we're going to make some investments and do commuter rail now, but eventually this is going to be high speed, then it starts to make more sense. We believe I-16 and that whole corridor has great possibilities in terms of energy. Now, everybody's not talking about energy quite as much when we're paying $4 for a gallon of gas, but it's going to be a long-term issue. We've got the first cellulosic ethanol plant in the country in Soperton, Georgia. All kinds of biofuel activity going on. We've got the Elba Island natural gas facility that we need to take advantage of in Savannah. Who knows what else? You can also, down that right-of-way, put pipelines carrying who knows what. And that has a lot of potential when you look at this in a strategic manner. So this is just a framework. As I said, this is just conceptual ideas that aren't our ideas. We got them from lots of different places. The studies have been done. We want to put this out there so it doesn't become this is my plan versus your plan, but this is something, let's start from this position where this is a statewide vision that we all can support, and then say, okay, how much is that going to cost and how are we going to pay for it? Now, to analyze this, we've got just a tremendous panel, because we want to look at this not just theoretically, is it going to work? Is it going to work logistically and, importantly, politically? And most importantly, is it realistic and practical and doable? And so the major part of this plan has to do with the trucking industry. So we'd be quite remiss to not talk to the truckers. And so representing the trucking industry is Ed Crowell of the Georgia Motor Trucking Association. Secondly, we talked a lot about distribution capability and can you shift that down to maybe a secondary hub around Macon? Maybe even the second airport that we've always talked about now might go there and handle air freight, freeing up airspace in Atlanta and Hartsfield-Jackson. Those kinds of questions we have with us Paige Siplon. He is Executive Director of the Georgia Logistics Innovation Center, headquartered down in Savannah on the Georgia Tech campus. And then, you know, we noticed we don't have anything in the Atlanta area. We're talking about moving things outside of Atlanta. You know, what does Atlanta region think about that? Well, with us we have Sam Owens with, I guess, the award-winning now Atlanta Regional Commission to address some of those issues from the Metro Atlanta perspective. And the way we're going to do this, I'm going to ask each of them to come up and give a short, 15-minute, roughly, presentation. I'm going to allow the panelists, after that point, to maybe ask questions of each other. I may have some follow-up questions, and we're going to open it up to the audience.